All right, let's dive into the White House. And I don't just mean the building itself, the one we see all the time on the news. I mean, like, the real stories, like behind the scenes, the stuff most people don't know. We've got some really fascinating sources for this deep dive. First, there's The Hidden History of the White House by Corey Mead. And we'll also be pulling from the work of journalist Kate Anderson Brower, who wrote The Residence, Inside the Private World of the White House. She really focuses on the staff, which is such a unique perspective. We're going to take you on this journey through time, revealing the kind of unexpected events and the human stories that have really shaped this, like, symbol of American power.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how much we usually just focus on like the presidents themselves
Mm.
and their policies, of course, the things that come out of the White House. But, there's this whole other layer of history shaped by all the people who like built the White House, lived in it, and kept it running all these years.
It's like that saying, if walls could talk, right? Well, in this case, they kind of can. Corey Mead, in his book, he doesn't shy away from the maybe less glamorous parts of the White House's beginnings. It's easy to picture all the grandeur, but can you imagine actually building this place like back in 1791?
Yeah, Mead really paints a very different picture from, that pristine image we have today. He really brings to light the role of enslaved Black workers
Yeah.
who were instrumental in the construction. I mean, just imagine the backbreaking labor of digging the foundation, clearing that land. It was thickly forested to make way for those grand avenues of D.C.
It's a stark reminder of the complex history embedded in those very walls. Mead, he describes unfinished rooms, freezing temperatures, a charred landscape outside from all the clearing. I mean, it sounds almost dystopian.
And it wasn't just the enslaved laborers. Mead talks about this diverse workforce that included indentured servants and also skilled craftsmen from Scotland and Ireland, all contributing to this iconic building.
Okay, so we have this brand new White House, symbol of the young nation. Fast forward just 13 years, and boom, it's attacked. The War of 1812, I mean, most of us learned about it in school, but did you ever realize just how vulnerable D.C. was back then?
It's easy to assume it was always a major target, but the prevailing belief was that it was so strategically insignificant that the British wouldn't even bother.
Famous last words, right? Corey Mead, he recounts these incredible details of that night. Picture this. Dolly Madison, she's planning a dinner party. As British troops are marching on the city, there's this ragtag group of American volunteers trying desperately to hold them back. And the British, they actually feast on the Madison's dinner before setting the whole place ablaze.
It really captures the chaos and uncertainty of war, I mean. And there's this one detail Mead highlights that I find so interesting. The stone walls, a choice made by George Washington, actually saved the White House from being completely destroyed.
Well, thank goodness for that, right? Imagine if we had to rebuild it every time something like that happened. But, even after being burned down, security wasn't always, let's say, top-notch. Think about Andrew Jackson's inauguration in 1829. It was a whole different kind of attack on the White House.
Oh, yeah, Jackson was the people's president,
Right.
And his populist appeal, it drew unprecedented crowds to his inauguration. What was supposed to be a traditional reception turned into absolute mayhem.
I'm talking like men standing on furniture in muddy boots, punch bowls being spilled, people pushing and shoving. Jackson himself nearly suffocated, just from all the well-wishers.
It kind of makes you wonder, what did that say about Jackson's image, as a man of the people? Was this wild scene genuine enthusiasm, or was it maybe a warning sign about populism? It's something to think about.
And get this, the White House steward. He supposedly lured the rowdy crowd out with tubs of spiked punch, out on the lawn. You could call that early crisis management, White House style.
Right.
Definitely different than today. Speaking of managing chaos, let's talk about the people who really kept the White House running, no matter who was in charge. The staff.
Yeah. Kate Anderson Brower, she really shines a light on these unsung heroes. Over 100 people working behind the scenes, butlers, electricians, housekeepers, you name it. And their dedication isn't to any particular president or political party. It's to the institution itself.
Exactly. They're the people who ensure the White House functions as a home, as an office, and as a symbol, all at the same time.
They often develop these incredible relationships, too, with presidents and first ladies, becoming like confidants and keepers of secrets.
Yeah, the story of Mary Prince, the Carter's nanny, it's a great example of that. She went from a life sentence in prison to becoming a cherished member of the Carter family. It's really a story about second chances,
Yeah.
and the power of human connection, even within those powerful walls. And it's not just warm, fuzzy feelings, right? These staff members, they're often privy to some of the most intense moments in history, witnessing presidential decisions, personal struggles, all up close.
Think about Bill Clyburn, the electrician who was there during Nixon's resignation. He shared this really poignant moment with Nixon, offering him words of comfort. I mean, imagine that.
It's a good reminder that these are real people, experiencing history firsthand.
And sometimes even playing a role in shaping how the public perceived those events. Like, for example, the staff worked carefully to shield the public from FDR's reliance on a wheelchair. Out of respect for his wishes, of course. But it also makes you think about how much control the White House has over the narratives, the stories we come to believe about our presidents.
Speaking of control and narratives, well, the White House has seen its fair share of secrets, some more shocking than others.
Yeah, one of the most startling involves Woodrow Wilson. In 1919, he suffered a debilitating stroke, but instead of informing the public, his wife, Edith, essentially became the shadow president for the rest of his term.
Wow, to think that a president was incapacitated
Yeah.
and the public had no idea. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really raises questions about transparency, and the balance of power. Here we are in a period of huge global change after World War I, and the leader of the free world is essentially absent. What impact did that have on decisions being made? What does it say about the trust we place in our leaders?
These are questions I bet you never even thought about before we started this deep dive, huh?
Paul.
From secret presidencies to, well, tense moments in the Situation Room, it's hard to imagine a place more steeped in history and drama than the White House.
Oh, and speaking of the Situation Room, we have to talk about the raid that took down Osama bin Laden. It's got to be one of the most defining moments in recent history, and what was happening inside the White House during that operation. Now, that's a story that really gets your heart racing.
We all know the outcome, of course, but the details, like what was going on inside those walls while the raid was happening, it's incredible.
Imagine being in Obama's shoes, huddled in the Situation Room with his team, watching that grainy video feed. As the raid unfolds in real time, they didn't even have a clear picture of what was happening.
Yeah, and one of the helicopters seemingly crashed. And for a moment, they had no idea if it was intentional or if the pilot had, actually executed a skilled maneuver to avoid disaster. Can you imagine the tension in that room?
Obama himself described it as the most nerve-wracking experience of his life.
And then to try and keep that kind of secret while also, attending a lighthearted dinner.
Yeah, this is where Kate Anderson Brower's experience comes in. She was a White House press pool reporter at the time. She describes this incredible atmosphere of excitement and relief when the news broke, but also the irony of the timing. It's unbelievable.
It came right after the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Obama was, making jokes and giving speeches, all while knowing this incredibly risky operation was in progress.
Talk about compartmentalizing, right?
It really makes you think about the incredible burden of leadership. To be able to function under that kind of pressure and keep these secrets that could literally change the world. It's fascinating how much goes on behind the scenes that we, the public, never even know about. And it makes you wonder, how do these hidden stories shape our understanding of the presidency, of power, and of the people who occupy this unique space?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one we're going to keep exploring as we dive deeper into these amazing sources you've provided. I mean, we've only just scratched the surface.
It's interesting, when we think of the White House, it's easy to just focus on the big events like wars, elections, scandals. But sometimes it's those smaller, more personal stories that really give us a glimpse into the human side of this place.
Oh, absolutely. Corey Mead actually tells one such story in his book that I've found really fascinating. It's about the dinner party that Theodore Roosevelt hosted back in 1901,
Right.
with Booker T. Washington as the guest of honor.
Now, for those who maybe need a quick refresher, Booker T. Washington was a very prominent African-American leader and educator, of course. At the turn of the 20th century, he was a controversial figure, advocating for black advancement through things like education and economic self-sufficiency, which, wasn't exactly a universally popular stance, especially in the South.
Right, and remember, this is just a few decades after the Civil War, so racial tensions are still incredibly high. So for Roosevelt, a newly elected president at the time, to invite Washington to dinner at the White House, well, let's just say it was a pretty bold move.
And it's interesting, Washington himself was actually hesitant at first. He knew this dinner would probably cause a backlash, especially from Southern politicians and white supremacist groups.
Yeah, he definitely understood the potential consequences.
But ultimately, he decided to accept the invitation, seeing it as an opportunity, however symbolic, to really push for progress.
It was a calculated risk, for sure.
Mead actually describes how Washington was really struck by the informality of the Roosevelt household. Kids running around, pets being brought in during dinner. It's a far cry from that, like, stuffy, formal image we often have of the White House.
It's a good reminder that the Roosevelts were, a family first and foremost, just trying to navigate the complexities of presidential life, balancing tradition with their own personal style.
But then, as you might expect, news of this dinner leaked to the press. And the reaction, especially in the South, was explosive. I mean, there was outrage, accusations of social impropriety. Some even saw it as a direct threat to the existing racial hierarchy.
It became this lightning rod for all these really charged discussions
Hmm.
about race, social equality, and the power of the White House as a symbol. It really shows how even seemingly simple acts, like sharing a meal, can have these far-reaching consequences when they play out on the national stage.
The White House is definitely a place where societal norms are challenged. And, on a more practical level, it's also a building that needs constant upkeep. I mean, it's not just a symbol, right? It's a physical structure that needs a lot of work.
Oh, absolutely. Mead actually describes the state of the White House in 1949 as downright alarming. We're talking rotting floors, crumbling plaster, a chandelier that almost crashed down on some guests.
Wait, so you're telling me the People's House was basically a fixer-upper nightmare?
Pretty much, the Trumans actually had to move out for major renovations. And what's really interesting is that the renovations themselves, they tell us a lot about the anxieties of the time. For example, they added a fortified bomb shelter. It was known as Project 9.
Right, a reminder of those Cold War fears.
Exactly. The White House is always adapting, to the changing needs and anxieties of the nation. And sometimes those adaptations have unintended consequences.
We're talking about Nixon's secret taping system, right?
Exactly. In the early 70s, Nixon decided to install this secret recording system in the Oval Office. His reason, he said, was to ensure accurate records of his conversations. But a lot of historians believe it was really driven by, paranoia and this desire for control.
Now, we all know how that turned out. Those tapes ended up being a key part of the Watergate scandal, which of course led to his resignation. A classic case of unintended consequences.
It also raises some big questions about presidential power, right? And accountability. How much privacy should a president have? And at what point does secrecy become, detrimental to democracy?
It's a tough question. And it makes you wonder what other secrets those walls are hiding.
Well, beyond the recordings and documents, there are the stories of the staff, the people who actually witnessed history, but often remain silent.
And Kate Anderson Brower really gives them a voice in her book. She shares all these stories that highlight the unique bond that often develops between the staff and the first families.
Like the story of Freddie Mayfield, the White House pot washer, who went bowling with Nixon in the middle of the Watergate scandal.
Wait, seriously? While the whole world is watching this political drama unfold, Nixon is going bowling with a member of the kitchen staff.
It's a really interesting insight into, the pressures and isolation of the presidency, Nixon facing all that scrutiny. Maybe he found some sense of normalcy in that simple act.
It shows that the staff are more than just employees, right? They're witnesses to history. But they also provide comfort, stability, a sense of normalcy in this very unusual environment.
They're the ones who keep the White House running no matter who's in charge, making sure the traditions and rituals continue.
And they face some really tough choices, too, balancing loyalty to the first family with their duty to the country.
Brower describes one dilemma the staff faced, having to decide whether to tell Michelle Obama about the bullets that were fired at the White House while her husband was away.
Oh, wow. That must have been an incredibly difficult decision, to shield her from worry, but also to be truthful about the potential danger.
It's a good reminder that the White House isn't just a stage for political drama. It's a home where real people live and experience the full range of human emotions.
Fear, joy, sadness, relief, it's all happening there, alongside the decisions that shape history.
And sometimes those emotions, those seemingly small moments, they can have a huge impact on how events play out.
Thinking back to Edith Wilson, shielding the public from the truth about her husband's stroke, that decision, made out of love and concern, had a ripple effect across the world.
It raises some big questions, right? About presidential power, the role of the First Lady, and the balance between transparency and privacy in the highest office in the land.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and spark debate, reminding us that even the most carefully constructed narratives can be disrupted by unexpected events and human frailties.
And that the hidden history of the White House, the personal stories, the behind-the-scenes decisions, the secrets, they often reveal as much, if not more, about the presidency than the official record.
You know, it's amazing to think about all the stuff that happens behind closed doors that we never see, like from quiet acts of kindness to major cover-ups. The hidden history of the White House really adds this whole other dimension to, like, what we think we know about the presidency.
Yeah, it's like, when you hear a juicy piece of gossip about someone you thought you knew, suddenly you see them in a totally different light, right?
Totally.
And that's what's so compelling about these stories. From Corey Mead and Kate Anderson Brower, they peel back all these layers of this iconic building, and they reveal the human drama unfolding inside.
Like, remember that story about the staff concealing FDR's reliance on a wheelchair? It was out of respect, sure.
Yeah.
But it also makes you think about how those behind-the-scenes decisions really shape the image of a president, and ultimately how they're remembered in history.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder what other stories haven't been told, What other details have been carefully managed, or even, erased from the public record.
It's like the White House itself is a character
Right.
in this ongoing drama, a silent witness to all the triumphs and tragedies, the secrets and scandals.
And like any good character, it has layers. I mean, we've talked about the physical structure, the renovations, the security measures, but there's also this intangible layer, right? The symbolism.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So when you think about the White House, what does it represent to you, to the American people?
Yeah.
To the world?
That's a tough question. Probably a million different answers, depending on who you ask.
Sure.
It's the people's house. But it's also a fortress, a symbol of power, authority.
Right.
It's where presidents make, life or death decisions. But it's also where families celebrate holidays, raise their kids.
It's so interesting how it's both of those things, grand, but also intimate, like a stage for global events, but also a backdrop for personal moments.
Yeah, and those personal moments, they can be so revealing.
Totally.
Like that story Kate Anderson Brower tells about the electrician who comforted Nixon after his resignation speech. Just a small act of kindness in the midst of one of the most, tumultuous periods in American history.
Wow. I mean, imagine that. The weight of the world on Nixon's shoulders. And he finds comfort in this connection with a member of the staff.
It really shows the role of the staff in providing a sense of continuity, normalcy even, in the face of extraordinary circumstances.
They're the ones who stay, right?
Yeah.
No matter who's in the Oval Office, making sure the traditions continue.
Exactly.
Thinking about that story of Obama attending that correspondence dinner while knowing about the bin Laden raid. Talk about high pressure.
It takes incredible compartmentalization, I think, to function like that, making jokes, small talk, while knowing about a mission with such global consequences.
And then to see it unfold in the Situation Room through that video feed.
Can you imagine?
The tension must have been unreal.
It's a good reminder that even today, with all our technology, intelligence, these operations are still so uncertain.
Feel risky.
And the stories from the staff, they really drive that point home.
They see the human cost of these events,
The emotional
on everyone. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the hidden history of the White House, does it change how you see this building, how you think about the presidency?
I think it has to, It humanizes the office, reminds us that presidents are not just like figures in a history book, but real people facing incredible challenges.
It makes you question the narratives too, right?
Mhm.
Look beyond the official accounts, consider the motivations, the compromises
The moments of doubt.
that shape history.
I think most importantly, it reminds us that the White House isn't just a building. It's like this living, breathing entity
I like that.
shaped by the people who have lived there, the events that have happened, and the secrets, those whispers in the corridors.
It's a place that holds both the promise and the peril of American democracy, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
A stage for triumphs, but also tragedies. A symbol of unity, but also division.
It's complicated.
Just like our nation's history.
And I think as long as it stands, the White House will continue to fascinate us, intrigue us, inspire us. It reminds us of the power, the fragility of human nature, and this, ongoing pursuit of a more perfect union.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the White House. If you want to learn more, definitely check out the sources we've been talking about. The Hidden History of the White House by Corey Mead, and The Residence, Inside the Private World of the White House by Kate Anderson Brower. They're both full of incredible stories that will stay with you.
Yeah, and until next time, Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering those hidden stories that shape our understanding of the world.